Well, it took more than 40 years, but they finally did it. Somebody finally, after years of effort, made something worse than the 1978 Star Wars Holiday Special. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, if you've never seen it, and I've never been able to watch the whole thing, it's that bad, the Star Wars Holiday Special must be seen to be disbelieved. You will literally not believe it happened as you're watching it. Watching it play out. It's that bad. It was the show that answered the question nobody was asking. What if Star Wars was a 70s variety show with B. Arthur, Harvey Korman in drag, Jefferson Starship, scenes of Wookiees speaking their native language to one another with no subtitles, and Luke and Leia on enough cocaine to blow up the Death Star without getting anywhere near the ventilation shaft? This thing was just... It was the worst thing ever. According to Rotten Tomatoes, the holiday special is rated 21% fresh by audiences and 25% by critics. And I think the positives, everybody were as drugged up as Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill were when they shot this thing. But get this. Over at Disney Plus, Star Wars The Acolyte, which I think has got 5 episodes out now, is rated just 14% fresh. Disney actually made something that people like even less than the 1978 holiday special. Bill, to its credit, I guess, the holiday special has some pretty solid excuses. They had a low budget. I think they shot the thing for $14. Crap tons of cocaine. George Lucas was not involved at all, and the whole thing was, put together with his 1978 disco mindset.
And Star Wars was a movie. It wasn't a cultural phenomenon. It wasn't a force of nature. It was just a movie.
Exactly. Just the year before. Now Star Wars has all of this history. The Acolyte has a $180 million budget. So what's its excuse?
Well, The Acolyte is the final. People have been saying it's the final nail in the Star Wars coffin. People have been saying that since The Last Jedi. But this one, this one really has done it. There's a term in fandom called retconning, where you basically retroactively conform something to fit your new model. In other words, we have this history of, let's say, photon torpedoes work this way in Star Trek, and now we're saying, no, we were wrong the whole time. Forget all that stuff. This is how they actually work, right? So basically, what they've done is they've turned the Jedi, which for many people who grew up with Star Wars is in fact an actual religion. I've argued prior to the destruction of Star Wars by Disney that Star Wars was the religion of post-Christian America. You certainly could make a case for it.
It's a good argument,
10, 15 years ago. But basically what they've done now is they've made the Jedi into a bunch of Child Protective Service bounty hunters who come along and take gifted children, especially gifted female children of color, away from their all-women parents and take them away to torture camps and force them to do Jedi things. So they've turned the Jedi from the good guys to the bad guys. They have basically, the story takes place about these two girls who are twins of each other, who were raised by what has been described online as a coven of lesbian space witches, and they live in a castle that's made out of stone, and then they all die in a fire, which is difficult to explain in this exclusively stone castle, but basically, Steve, they've even gotten rid of the Force, because now they don't talk about the Force anymore. Now the coven of lesbian space witches refer to it as the thread, and it's no longer a force that permeates all living things and allows you sensations or insights. Now it is. Now the thread is simply a force field that you can use to throw people against walls and pull them towards you, and it's just a magic tractor beam, basically, is what it is. So you can only destroy a thing so far. And the thing that needs to be said for people who don't understand fandom is this: there's something called canon, and canon is essential to fandom.
It's a thing you can't violate. It's canon.
So for people to understand what it means, a canonical reference in the Bible would be a reference that's a credible reference. And then I could say something, that happened during biblical times, but that doesn't mean it's true because it's not canonical. The Book of Bill is not in the modern Bible.
It should be.
So basically what happens, folks, is that the only source of canon is the actual studio itself. And what they did with The Last Jedi was they took Luke Skywalker, who was the perfect example of the journey of the hero, an unknown farm boy who discovers greatness in himself, and after a great many trials and tribulations and lows and effort and sacrifice, manages to not only overcome the villains, but to overcome the villains inside himself and transcend himself into the hero. And that's where we left Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi in the end of the original trilogy. But The Last Jedi, made 20 years later, brought back Luke Skywalker as an old reclusive hermit attempting murder of his nephew, who does nothing but run away from fights, sits there, drinks green, cow milk, and is a bitter, beaten, lonely, sad, pathetic old man. Now, if you're a Star Wars fan, you can't undo that. That is now canonical. That is what happened to Luke Skywalker. And for those people who are saying, well, why would you do that? I would simply posit to you that some of the people that finance Disney, like BlackRock and China, don't particularly like the idea that a young individual person can decide in his head to rise up against tyranny, hop into a fighter jet, and bring down the mechanism of destruction that is this tyrannical state. That is a mythology that has to be destroyed. And that's what Disney has managed to do with whatever's left of Star Wars with the Acolyte. They've taken what was a 80% male fan base, written males out of it completely. Kathleen Kennedy is famous for saying the Force is female. Congratulations, you've got a Star Wars now that is tailored to transgender and lesbian audiences, and they don't know why the entire franchise is falling apart.
Yeah, and if the lesbian space witches had been hotter, maybe I would have watched the thing until I read that they chanted babies into existence to fight the patriarchy.
That's
and I'm
right.
like, oh no.
That's right. And by the way, just talking about destruction of canon, I'm a Star Trek fan, obviously, right, guys? But Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader, was supposed to be the only creature that was created without a father. He was created by the Force. He was of divine origin, essentially. And now it's just something you can do if you got the right castle on the right planet someplace.
You chant
you put some
hard.
Barry White on the tunes, and you crank out as many immaculate conception space children as you want to. So bye Star Wars. Thanks for all the fish.
Okay, Scott, I think we've talked enough about the Acolyte. There's a broader cultural issue that I've noticed here. And it's a real head scratcher for me. I got to get the numbers here. Audiences hated The Acolyte, as I just told you earlier, but critics loved it. It is 84% fresh, according to critics on Rotten Tomatoes. And I don't use aggregators to decide what movies or TV shows I'm going to watch, because I think aggregators suck. What I like is critics who I trust, that I might not agree with them, but if I can read their review and get a sense for whether or not I will like the movie, I think that's very useful. But the aggregators are useful, I think, for looking at cultural trends. And one is this increasing divide between critics and audiences that is fairly new, where it's not just a little different, like audiences liked it here and critics liked it. No, these huge spreads, things down in the teens and things up in the 80s and 90s. And do you have a theory for what explains that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many critics there are, because can you fill like a whole theater every night with critics? Because I
Depends
think
on how low in the food chain you want to go. And wow, What a Movie guy on whatamovie.com is a critic now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an influencer, or at least that's what I just decided to start calling myself. But anyway, yeah, it's a little mystifying. And I think forever critics have looked for different things in movies, or at least most critics, than audiences do, except for the ones that really connected with audiences. So there were always, like you say, there's some critics you trust. There are some critics who have done their job effectively where you go, you know what, if that guy likes it, I'm probably going to like it. And if he doesn't like it, I'm probably not going to like it. But I don't think most people just go, oh, well, let's look at the critic score. Ooh, if generic critics don't like it or do like it, then that's going to affect my decision. I just don't think people think that way. I don't even know what the Acolyte means. I've heard virtually nothing about it. So what used to be in the zeitgeist of everywhere, like, when Star Wars did something, everybody knew about it. I'm not hearing anybody talk about it. I'm not seeing anything about it. And so maybe they need to do a better job at promoting it. It's a film, right? It's not a TV show.
It's a series on Disney Plus.
Series
series 8 or 10
Disney.
episodes.
See, I have Disney Plus, and I did not know about that. So, and I'm not averse to watching. We've watched we watched The Mandalorian. We watched that other terrible thing with Obi-Wan. I forget what that was even called.
Oh boy, that was not good.
Yeah,
it was called Obi-Wan, I think.
Okay, no wonder. Anyway, I just think in general we'd be better off going to YouTube and looking up some of the better fan fiction renderings. That people who actually love the series and respect the so-called canon of the series, which are just the kind of presumptions upon which a story. It used to be called backstory. Basically, you've got to base your ongoing story on things that are already part of the accepted story. I was trying to think of an exception to that where they pulled it off, and it's not the same. But it has been amazing to me how many different Batmans have successfully been portrayed. Everything from Adam West to Jack Nicholson to was it Christian Slater?
Bale.
Christian Bale.
Thank you. All these.
Yeah, and it was Michael Keaton who starred opposite Jack Nicholson in those first two Burton movies.
And all of these different renderings of Batman, but somehow most of them have managed to hold on to the essential thread of who Batman is. Some have been darker, some have been more comical or broad and kind of clownish renderings of it, but they've all somehow maintained the thread of what Batman is all about. And I think Star Wars lost their grip on that some time ago. And you can't just keep handing it off to other people who decide, you know what, I couldn't really come up with a movie on my own. So what I'm going to take is somebody else's story and put my spin on it because we already know this is a good story. And then you screw up the story. If you want to dream up your own little world, go ahead and do that. But don't take an existing world and wonder why people don't like it when you screw it up.
By the way, Steve, what you're getting at with Rotten Tomatoes, my feeling is if the critic score is 50% or higher than the public score, then somebody's getting paid.
I had never thought of that, and now I have to wonder. Yeah, and thing is, there's a really good role for movie critics, and it's one of the things I miss most about Siskel and Ebert. They were very different men, very different views, and they argued a lot. I don't even think they liked each other, even after all the years they were on TV together. But they both understood movies. They both loved movies, and when they explained a movie, They didn't just say, I like this movie, I don't like this movie, even though they had the famous thumbs up, thumbs down thing. They would explain it, especially in their columns, and I could tell, even if Roger Ebert said this movie sucked, from his review I could go, okay, that looks like a valid criticism, but it also looks like the kind of movie I would like, even though this guy I respect didn't. And that was so educational. I was very sad when both of those men passed away because they didn't just give me some nice movie reviews, they taught me how to enjoy movies better. And that's the critic's job, not to get some big score on Rotten Tomatoes. That said, I want to show you I'm not an old man grumpus when it comes to movies and entertainment here. I've got to give huge kudos to Disney's Inside Out 2. It's a great flick. It's a rehash of the first one, but it's a good rehash. Critics are calling it the first must-see movie of the year, and I think they're right. It's also the first Pixar movie since I don't even know when that lives up to the old Pixar brand, which that was a powerful brand for like 15 years or so. It's making tons of money for Disney, which is a big change for them. And the thing is, it isn't woke. Worth It or Woke It rated Inside Out 2 10% woke and 90% based. So Disney knows how to do this. Yeah. They haven't forgotten. They just don't want to. I don't know how to rate that. And that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. I'm Steve Green for Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.